About 2 years ago, we had just moved in. We moved in around August into Barclay Crest, and then in October, we being me, set off to Uganda. And in Uganda, we felt just like a wonderful sense of community. Children everywhere, and just families enjoying meals together outside, and just a great sense of community. We came home, and because of some crazy events, my ride wasn't at the church. I just kind of didn't say much about it because I only lived a block away, and I only had a rolling suitcase and a really, really, really big Ugandan drum with me, which I figured I could manage. Everybody left, and I took off. Kind of funny. So I was walking down the sidewalk in my brand new neighborhood, about 44 homes. We're all about 3 yards apart from each other, maybe 4. There's some type of city regulation. It's one of those things like when you burn your popcorn, the neighbors come over to see if everything's okay because we're all so close, right? And so I'm walking down the sidewalk, and I'm thinking, I probably look really, really awkward with this big drum and this suitcase, and I bet people are going to come out and be like, hey, new lady that just moved in, what are you doing with a big drum and a suitcase? And to my surprise, it was actually very quiet. Everybody's garage doors were shut. I guess their doors were shut. I'm not sure what was going on inside, or if they were inside at all, because you can't tell if anybody's home when your garage door is shut. But it was just quiet, and so that was a stark contrast to where I'd just been, where community was alive and all around you. So decided that maybe it was time for a change, and if the change was going to happen, it was probably going to have to happen in myself, and I had to knock on a door. So from there, I was able to meet a couple of neighbors and wonderful people. Got to know, not real well, but just hello, like most neighbors. Then in November, Henry asked me if he could be in the Macy's Day Parade on Thanksgiving morning, where I explained to him no, he could not. And being 5 or 4, I think he was at the time, he wanted to know why, and so I explained to him that it was in New York and everybody was already lined up and it had already started. And so he said, hey Mom, can we have a parade here? Oh, sure. So that's what we did. We made some flyers and we had our first annual Barclay Crest Christmas Parade. And to my surprise, I wasn't the only one that was looking for community and something to do, because we had a great turnout. For me, the focus is not creating a big event that's hard to reproduce, but more just creating a place where people can gather. And the truth is that I still don't know everybody in the neighborhood, but I'm hoping that other people are starting to get to know each other a little bit better. So some of the things that we've done is chili cook-offs, which was one of my favorite. And for folks that couldn't come out, we had Tupperware dishes and we went and delivered the chili, which was my second favorite part of the event. And then we've had a very, very simple, easy thing to do was sidewalk chalk art. We try to welcome spring each year with a couple of pieces of chalk in the mailboxes, and folks come out and just write good messages for our joggers and stroller pushers, and there's just a huge sense of community. If you can't be there to say hello, just to write, hey, I love you, and happy Easter. So that's one of them. So one thing that we have all just gathered around as neighbors is once we start to build community within our own neighborhood, what does it look like to continue to serve the community that's outside of Barclay Crest? And one thing that was kind of brought to us was the East Alabama Food Bank and their food pantry, and just a need for canned foods. And so Barclay Crest got together, and each of us has a green bag that we love and have our address printed squarely on the bottom or on the handle, your choice. And you get about 7 weeks to pick up 7 items from the grocery store and bring them all together on a given day. Our next event is in July, and we just sort them, and it's just a fun way to still get together and still love on each other with a greater purpose in mind.
His love is deep, his love is wide. and it covers us. His love is fierce, His love is strong, it is furious. His love is sweet, His love is wild, and it's waking hearts to life. Oh yeah, yeah. Oh, His love is deep, His love is wide, and it covers us. His love is fierce, His love is strong, it is furious. His love is sweet, His love is wild, and it's waking hearts to life. Oh, it's waking hearts to life. Yes, it's waking hearts to life. Oh, His love.
Hey, I'm PJ. We're out here just in Barclay Crest, just trying to teach our girls about what it means to give back. We've been at Cornerstone now for 6 years and just trying to teach them some of the giving grace that Cornerstone has taught us.
So we're having a food drive at my house, and we're gonna give it to other people, and we surrounded our whole neighborhood, and we gave them bags. So they bring them on this day, and we sort the food that's in them.
What kind of food?
Well, breakfast, rice, and pasta, chips, other food.
Henry, what happens to the food? Do you know where it goes?
The Alabama Food Bank.
Do you know what happens after that?
It goes to other people
Awesome.
that don't have it.
You have a fun?
Yes.
Give a thumbs up.
I wish we could get Amy to smile a little more and maybe express herself some. So reserved, you know. Anyway, and Henry, you know, just awesome there at the end. But we just, you know, really appreciate the simple act that they did in their neighborhood of just trying to identify with folks that live right there around them and find some way for them to get together and just to know each other. And then that has kind of built on itself over time. And was talking to Amy this week at Camp Cornerstone, and she was saying that some of what they have done has actually reproduced on its own now. Some other people are trying this, and which is just great. And they made it so simple it was easy enough for anybody to be able to take it and kind of put it in their neighborhood. So if you're interested in the Green Bag Project, if you would like to bring that to your neighborhood or be involved in it, or you just want to know more information about how to make that work, Brian Johnson, who's leading worship this morning, is going to be over there at the serve table, which is the middle one. And so you can just go right after the service, have a conversation with him, and he can kind of tell you a little bit more about how they did that and maybe how you can be involved in that. By the way, it's great to have Brian over here this morning. We cleaned him up, got him out of the bar, and brought him over here to lead worship, so that was great. And he's doing a great job with the Bread Pub, and you can also ask him questions about that. He can share for a long time about all this going on over there. Dustin's taking the weekend off, much deserved time off. He led worship every night for Camp Cornerstone and did an amazing job and wore this crazy get up, and it was hilarious, but I wish you could have been here. Anyway, great week. So that video is a great setup this morning for what we're going to be talking about with the art of neighboring. And that's a sermon series that we started last week. If you're new this morning, let me just catch you up. One thing that we know and that we have discovered in our modern time and in our current society is that we have lost something, and we call it the art of neighboring. You know, we've lost this idea of really connecting with those people who live right around us, and people have written books about this. That, you know, there was a day when we used to know our neighbors and connect with them and do things with them and take care of each other's kids and do cookouts and all this kind of stuff. And we knew when something was wrong with our neighbor. But as time has gone on and as we've built these things called privacy fences and as we've stuck our cars in garages and as social media has come online and we've gotten these things called cell phones, a lot of that whole connecting with your neighbor thing has kind of gone by the wayside a little bit. And yet we know in the Bible that God said that He has placed every single one of us specifically in the places where we live. And He did that for a reason. In our neighborhoods, literally, with these people around us, so that we could connect with them. And I'm just as guilty as anybody else, and we talked about this last week of driving right out of my driveway, right past my neighbor, coming to church because I gotta serve at the church, or getting right on a plane and flying to Uganda all the while. Maybe my neighbor's sitting there with great needs, but I wouldn't know it because I didn't take the time to stop. You know what I'm saying? And this is something that we need to recapture, because a part of our purpose in life, loving God, and then what? Serving others, loving our neighbor. And so we've got to figure out a way that we can stop and just deal with the people right around us and do that really well. And so that's what we're talking about for these few weeks, is just the art of neighboring. How can we do this well? And how can God be glorified in that? And how can he use us to reach these people who he has put right around us? So one of the questions that we asked last week that we're going to delve into this morning is, who is my neighbor? How do we define that person? If we say it's everybody, then it's nobody. And I think that Jesus would say that it starts with somebody and then moves to everybody. So we're going to look at that this morning. If you have your Bibles, we're going to be in Luke chapter 10, verses 25 through 37. If you don't, we're going to have this up on the screen for you in just a minute. Luke chapter 10, verses 25 through 37. This passage this morning is going to read very much like the passage that we read last week out of Mark 12. It's the same deal, it's the same interaction, Jesus and an expert in the law. But we're going to peer a little bit farther into Jesus' heart in this passage. So let me just read it and then we'll talk about it on the other side, okay? Starting in verse 25. It says, on one occasion, an expert in the law stood up to test Jesus. Teacher, he asked, what must I do to inherit eternal life? What is written in the law? Jesus replied. How do you read it? He answered, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, and with all your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. You have answered correctly, Jesus replied. Do this and you will live. But he wanted to justify himself, so he asked Jesus, and who is my neighbor? In reply, Jesus said, a man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho when he was attacked by robbers. They stripped him of his clothes, beat him, and went away, leaving him half dead. A priest happened to be going down the same road, and when he saw the man, he passed by on the other side. So too a Levite, when he came to the place and saw him, passed by on the other side. But a Samaritan, as he traveled, came where the man was, and when he saw him, he took pity on him. He went to him and bandaged his wounds, pouring on oil and wine. Then he put the man on his own donkey, brought him to an inn, and took care of him. The next day he took out 2 denarii and gave them to the innkeeper. Look after him, he said. And when I return, I will reimburse you for any extra expense you may have. Which of these 3 do you think was a neighbor to the man who fell into the hands of the robbers? The expert in the law replied, the one who had mercy on him. And Jesus told him, go and do likewise. All right, so we have this expert in the law, just like last week, who asked this question, what must I do to inherit eternal life? What's the trick, Jesus? What's the thing? What do I need to do? And the response is the same. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. This is part of the Shema. This is the foundation of the law. This is what we read out of Deuteronomy. So he gets that right, and Jesus says, you're right, so just go do that. And that really should be the end of the story, But the expert in the law is concerned about something. He's like, well, I get that, love the Lord your God and with all that you are. I'm working on that. But I really want clarification on this love your neighbor deal. Who is my neighbor? And you see, here's the thing. He grew up with this idea that his neighbor was the person just like him. It was a Jew who was in his social class. That's my neighbor. That's who I should help. That makes perfect sense to most people in that culture. And so when he asked this question, the obvious response is, well, it's your fellow Jew. But that's not what Jesus said, did he? In fact, Jesus didn't get real specific at all. And in fact, he didn't give him a pat answer. He just launches into this story. And it's an interesting story, and it would have been a shocking story, actually, to those people who were right there listening. And he says, there was a man, and he went down the road from Jerusalem to Jericho. Now, I've been to the Holy Land, and if you've been to the Holy Land, you've probably been to this road. There, the road is still there. It's still pretty much the same. It's a 17-mile stretch between Jerusalem and Jericho. There's about a 3,000-foot elevation drop as you go down that road. The thing about the road is it's very desolate. I mean, when you're somewhere between Jerusalem and Jericho, you're in nowhere land. And there's a lot of twists and turns and high cliffs on the side. There's a lot of shadows during the day. And back then, this was a place where robbers loved to hide and hijack people and beat them up and steal whatever they had. So everybody who heard this would have known about this road. And they're like, oh man, you should never go down that road. That's what you get. So anyway, so he says, so the man went down this road. He got beat up. Robbers came. They beat him until he was half dead. They took everything that he had. And it says they stripped him of his clothes. Now, here's this man who has nothing, who's laying there naked, or as we say around here, naked. He's laying there. And yet that's the only description we have of this guy. Jesus doesn't say necessarily that he's a Jew, although Jesus would have known that the experts in the law and everybody listening would have automatically assumed it was a Jew. But really, the thing is, he's everybody and anybody. He could just as easily be you and I. That's why we're given no specific description of him. And so there he is, laying there. And then Jesus said, 3 passersby came. First one is a priest. Now, the priests generally in that day were of a higher social order, so he would have been riding a horse probably. So he's coming up to go to Jerusalem because he's going to go and perform his duties as a priest at the temple by burnt offerings. I was like, what does the priest do? Anyway, by doing his job and offerings. And what the deal is, he would have done like a 2-week stretch of this, and then he would have rotated off. That's how it happened in the temple. So he's going on this stretch of the road, going up to Jerusalem, and he sees this guy laying beside the road. And the closer he gets, the more that he realizes, uh-oh, wait a minute. And maybe it registers in his mind, this guy's in trouble. He's probably dead because the guy wasn't moving and he didn't know if he was breathing and is in need. But you see, here's the deal. By the law of a priest, he couldn't be within 4 yards of a dead person. He doesn't know if the guy's dead because he never got close enough to know that. But just in case, he keeps his horse kind of out here. And the other thing is, if he were to go up and actually touch the guy, he'd be defiled. He'd be unclean. And then he'd have to go through this long ritual to be cleansed, and it's quite possible that he would have then sort of given up on his duties. And also, if he'd have stopped to help the guy, he'd be late. And so all kinds of ramifications for him. So he neglects the greatest commandment to love his neighbor, to go do priestly duties. All right, the next guy is a Levite. The Levite was probably not far behind the priest because Levites in that day were the ones who assisted the priests with the offerings at the temple. So the Levite is coming up. He also sees the man, realizes there's something wrong, and his heart probably went out to him, and in his mind he thought, love your neighbor, that kind of thing. But the priest didn't stop and help, so maybe I shouldn't. And so he does just like the priest. Goes right by him. So here's the deal. We've got a situation here where the robbers hurt the man by violence. The priest and the Levite hurt the man by neglect. So everybody's guilty at this point of not helping this guy. But then a third passerby comes, Jesus says. Identifies this guy as a Samaritan. Now, if you know anything about Samaritans and Jews were like this. They did not get along. Samaritans happened because at one point Jews in exile began to marry people who lived in that land in Samaria, and then they had these children who became what we know as Samaritans, but the Jews always looked at them as what you call half-breeds, impure. And so they had this running battle for a long time. So the Samaritan comes by, and it's interesting because he has every reason not to stop. He has every reason not to stop. I don't need to help this guy, and if we think he's a Jew, then the Samaritan was definitely saying, I'm not going to help my enemy. I should just keep on rolling. Nobody would know the difference. But he doesn't. Jesus said that the Samaritan looked at the man and had pity on him. He saw him, but he didn't just see him. He looked at the state that he was in. This guy is in serious trouble. He's out here alone. He's been beat up. He doesn't have any money. He doesn't have anybody to help him. I have pity for this guy. And then it says he goes to him and he begins to bandage his wounds. And it says that he pours oil and wine on him. Now, I think that's very interesting because one of the offerings that you make in the temple is oil and wine. And in a way, it's like he's pouring out this offering on this guy who's so desperately in need. And then it says that he picks him up and he puts him on his own donkey and he takes him to an inn. He leaves the innkeeper with 2 denarii and he says, hey, listen, I've got to go, but when I come back, if there's any extra expense that you've incurred in taking care of this guy, I promise I'm going to pay it all back. And he goes off. Now, again, this story just would have been totally shocking and would have just messed with all the religious sensibilities of the people listening to this. Are you kidding? A Samaritan helped this guy? That cannot possibly have happened. And yet Jesus makes this guy kind of the hero of the story. Because Jesus was trying to make a point, right? He's trying to make a point about who our neighbor is and what they look like and what they're all about and what we're supposed to be doing in light of that. And I think one thing he's trying to tell us is, too, that if we go to help somebody, by the way, it might be messy. We might be getting into something that might be messy. I mean, imagine the Samaritan when he went to pick up this guy, the vivid illustration. The guy has no clothes on. He's bloody. And he picks him up and puts him on his donkey. I mean, just the story here itself is just so amazing what the guy went through to do this. And also, interestingly enough, the Samaritan was risking his reputation. Because if another Samaritan had seen him helping this person, if that was a Jew, that would have been trouble for him. He would have been ostracized in his community. And so he risked his own reputation to go and do this. Now, when I think about putting Jesus into this story, Jesus is very much like the Samaritan. He was very much an outcast. Teachers of the law, Pharisees, they didn't accept him for who he was. He was somebody who went to the unclean and to the poor and to the marginalized and reached out to them and ate with them and touched them and healed them. I mean, in the very same way we can identify Jesus with this Samaritan. Well, at the end of this story, Jesus asked the expert in the law, he says, all right, so I've told you this story. Now, as you hear this, which one of these people do you think was a neighbor to the man? And do you catch the guy's response? He doesn't say the Samaritan or the Good Samaritan. He says, the one who had mercy on him. And you can imagine he said it with great disgust because he's still upset about a Samaritan being involved in the story. The one who had mercy on him. And then Jesus replies to him and says, well, go and do likewise. And that guy was probably like, I'm going to have to think about that. I'm not quite sure if I'm up for that kind of task. And so as we think about putting us in the same situation, and we ask the question, who is our neighbor? Well, it's anybody that's nearby. It's anybody that needs help, for sure. It's anybody who's right next to us, who's like us, or who's not like us. It may be somebody who's very different than we are, somebody that we don't necessarily like, somebody that we don't get along with, It might be our enemy, I don't know. Jesus is saying, look, that's your neighbor. Go and do likewise. And so as I'm reading this passage, I'm like, all right, so how do I neighbor well based on what Jesus is trying to tell me here out of this passage? So here's a few things to think about. I think number one, when it comes to our neighbors, we have to first see them. We're really good, I think, in especially our culture, at people watching. You know how sometimes you go to the beach and you lay there and you just people watch? Because you're like, man, there's some funky people at the beach. They do weird things and they're kind of crazy. And we love to people watch, but how often do we genuinely see people and who they are and what they're about? And we can do this with our neighbors too, where it's like, man, you know, I watch my neighbors, I wave to them, and they wave back. But what's happening with them? What's going on there? Now, here's the deal. Last week, I told you that I was going to participate, right, in the card exercise that we did. And like I was going to go out there and I wasn't going to make you like report in, so I'm reporting in. So that happened for me this weekend. Took a little walk down my street, down in front of us. Caught one of my neighbors outside that I had waved to 100 times. And I said, all right, that's it. So I waved to him, and then I walked over to him, and I said, hey, look, I've been waving at you for a really long time, and I just need to apologize because I've never actually come and introduced myself. I'm Rusty, and so we kind of went through that, and they were very gracious and very kind, and we spent about 25 minutes sharing, and it was a great conversation. I learned a lot about them. They learned a lot about me, and that will not be the last time for me this summer. I just want you to know that. That was a great experience. And so one of the things that I'm learning is just I need to learn to see people rather than just watch them go by. I think that's important. I think that's what the Samaritan did. The second thing is, which is a little bit different than this, is be blind. So see them and be blind. Be blind to what? To their differences. Make yourself blind to the things that make them different from you. That's hard to do, isn't it? Because we get all caught up in, well, they're just not like me, And I think about what Paul wrote in Galatians 3:28. He said, there is neither Jew nor Gentile, neither slave nor free, nor male nor female, for you are all one in Christ Jesus. How many are we? He's like, don't make yourself different. Don't make yourself many. Make yourself one. Look at other people like you look at yourself. Love them well like Jesus loves them. Be blind to the differences. The next thing is just take time. This sounds so easy and simple, but I know how this goes, man. Taking time means I got to slow down. I got to stop the hurry up if I really want to get to know my neighbor. And don't we live in the land of hurry up? Man, we're hurrying. We got to get somewhere, anywhere. I was thinking about this week. A long time ago, I read an article in the news about this dog named Tattoo out in Tacoma, Washington. This guy had come home from bringing Tattoo, the basset hound, to the vet. And when he got home, he was going to drop the dog off with his wife, and he was going to go back to work. And so he gets Tattoo out of the back, and Tattoo has this really big, long leash on and drops him out beside the car. Wife's not paying attention. Owner closes the door, gets in his car, and takes off out of his driveway. What he doesn't realize is that he has shut Tattoo's leash in the door. And so little short basset hound legs, Tattoo starts running to keep up with the car. And the guy's doing, about 15, then 20. And at this point, a police officer on a motorcycle comes driving by the guy. And he's like, does a double take, like, was that a dog? And so he spins around and he comes and hits the lights and stops the guy. And he's like, hey, and the guy was just devastated. He was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this just happened. He felt so bad for what he had done to his poor dog, who was fine, by the way. But the police officer described it in the article, and he was like, man, little Tattoo, he got up to about 20, maybe 25. He did a couple of rolls, and he said he was picking him up and putting him down like his life depended on it. Picking him up and putting him down like his life depended on it. Man, I think about me and you. This life sometimes feels like we're just picking them up and putting them down like our life depends on it. I got to go, man. I'm in a hurry. I got to go here and there. But if you really want to connect with people, you can't treat them like that. Hey, I'd love to get to know you, but I got to go. I got to get to church. Oh, okay, Rusty, don't do that. Yeah, I got to get here. I got to get there. I got so much to do. And so one thing that we're going to have to do is learn how to take time. And then, I think another thing, and I would say this is the last thing, but there's so many things to talk about here, but it's just be selfless. Again, another thing that's hard for us to do is just to get ourselves out of the way so that we can see somebody else's needs, so that we can realize, there are other folks who have needs that are actually more than mine. They have struggles that are harder than mine. They have issues, that actually I might be able to help with. But we got to be willing to kind of get ourselves out of the way to make that happen. And, there's just so many good things that happen when we get out of ourselves. Somebody once said this: the power of selfless giving heals us and those around us in tangible ways. When we give help selflessly, it heals us and it heals those around us in tangible ways. And you know this is true if you do this. You know how that works. It's just a good thing. It's woven into who we are as people. Last thing here, a guy named Shane Claiborne wrote a book called The Irresistible Revolution. Shane ministers to people in downtown Philadelphia. But he spent a summer with Mother Teresa over in Calcutta, India. And he wrote in this book about this experience. And he was talking about the time when they were just kind of watching Mother Teresa. I'll just read you what he said in his book. He said, people often ask me what Mother Teresa was like. He said, sometimes it's like they wonder if she glowed in the dark or had a halo. She was short, wrinkled, and precious, maybe even a little ornery, like a beautiful, wise old granny. But there's one thing I will never forget, and that was her feet. Her feet were deformed. Each morning in Mass, I would stare at them. I wondered if she had contracted leprosy or some disease. But I wasn't going to ask, hey, Mother, what's wrong with your feet? One day a sister said to us, hey, have you noticed Mother Teresa's feet? And we all nodded yes. And she said, well, they're deformed. Because we get just enough donated shoes for everyone. And Mother does not want anyone to get stuck with the worst pair. So she digs through and she finds the worst pair and she wears them herself. And so years of doing that have deformed her feet. Years of loving her neighbor as herself deformed her feet. And Shane followed that up and he said, this is the kind of fasting that creates the divine longing for justice, where our feet become deformed by a love that places our neighbors above ourselves. I don't know. I just think about the way that Jesus asked us to reach out to people, to make sacrifices. And sometimes we look at that as such a barrier, such a hard thing. I can't be Mother Teresa. I don't know if I could be the Samaritan. And Jesus is like, hang in there. Yes, you can. You don't have to start here. Just start with one simple act of, hi, my name is, and see where that goes. And be willing to serve and be willing to go wherever the Spirit leads. And I think about how Jesus was our neighbor, wasn't he, on the cross? Who served us well, who picked us up and saved us with his selfless act on the cross.